Hi everyone, my name is Patrick Akil and joining me today is Willem Spruijt. He's founder and engineer over at Rise, and he's a serial startup founder actually, and has a unique experience working at Uber in their scale-up phase. We compare what it's like working at startups versus big tech and much, much more, so enjoy. I've been in smaller organizations, never a really startup vibe, I would say. Maybe startup kind of spin-offs from bigger organizations, but you have different funding structures in that way.
Yeah.
But the biggest organization I am in, and I have been, is ING. So huge bank.
Yeah.
And there I work with people that say, I don't want to do this. I only do this specifically.
Yeah.
Specifically this.
Yeah.
And I find it very strange because I'm like, but we have these types of problems and I know you can solve them. Might not be something you're good at, but I would expect someone to like pick it up. And they're like, no, I only want to do this. And I'm like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
That means we need a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because if everyone only wants to do one specific thing, it's going to be hard to do everything.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think you need a balance. And also in bigger companies, I think you need a balance. There's obviously people who have a bit more, I would say, are a bit more on the surface, right, in terms of knowledge, but actually know a lot of things about a lot of topics.
Yeah.
I think, to be honest, when I was at Uber, I think that type of person, a bit more than having that very specific knowledge. But I did have people in my team and that I saw at Uber who really said like, hey, I only want to work on networking, right? Like something extremely specific. Like my full passion is about networking. And they actually, that's also cool about bigger companies. They could be transferred to a specific networking team. So this team was only doing that, which was amazing to see. I even saw people that really struggled in like we were in a product team, which is really building the user facing, the app basically, and everything that interacts with the user. And some team members were really struggling there while they were really excelling at another place in the company when they really found their passion and they got transferred to that. And, so I think that could definitely really work. It's definitely a big advantage of a big company. Yeah.
Interesting. I wonder, like in the phases of my career, I know people that start off and they go to bigger companies because they think career progression, I'm going to stay there for a while. They hit for the biggest ones, Microsoft, Google, like that's for the top of the top, I would say. Uber, I think, is among there as well nowadays. For me, I started out and I wanted many responsibilities, mainly because I didn't know what I wanted to do exactly long term. And I still don't think I know exactly what I want to do long term. So I try and be in an environment where I have autonomy and where I can try out a lot of different things. Yeah. But I don't know what is better at the end. If someone starts out or even has already a few years under their belt, what would you advise? Would it be more startup or big tech, or does it depend?
Yeah, it depends. It depends also where where your passion is. If you say like you already have a few years of experience, it might also depend. Actually, Gerg and me wrote an article about this one as well. There's also like maybe some financial considerations, stuff that really people no one talks about. But I can imagine if you start out in your career, like not everybody's like, oh, I'm the founder type. Let me start a company. I think, especially I would say later in life, I would always say, getting older, right? I would say that becomes more important. It becomes harder to just say like, I'm quitting my job and I'm doing this super risky startup thing. So it could be a strategy to say like, I start my career, I started, I don't know, like Microsoft or one of the other big tech, and then I actually make some money. I build up a buffer. Could be a very conscious choice. You get to see a lot of different topics. You can find what you actually like. And then later on, you could say like, oh, let me actually try a startup. And that could either be like joining a startup, which in general, I think is also financially, I would say more risky, I would say not less attractive. It depends a bit on like how much risk do you want to take, right? So if you're a founder, you're taking, I think, a huge risk. If you're like maybe an early employee, you get sometimes like, for example, lower salary and more equity, which could turn out like way better than you would like get like at big tech, for example, right? So I think that is also, it's the stuff that nobody really talks about. Like, I think that's also the sort of financial consideration that you could have. And then there's also like what are you? I think what I heard a lot also about people that worked in big tech, that move to startups, they basically don't like this very specialized, being a very small player in this very big thing, right?
Yeah.
They say like, I want to have real impact. I want to join a really small company and I can actually contribute to the strategy, for example, of the company. Like, I really liked working at Uber, but I don't like, I was layers away from the strategy decisions, right?
Yeah.
Like, should we actually go into a new vertical, or like these really high level decisions. I think if you're really early at a startup, you can actually influence that.
Make that impact.
Yeah, make that impact. Yeah.
Very interesting. I want to go into more of the risk side and as well as how you can mitigate that. But before I do, I want to touch on learning, because for me, starting out really wide and having to have the autonomy to do many things, I felt like really accelerated kind of my learning at my own pace. And what I've seen, and especially in ING, some people have been there out of university now for 10, even 15 years, same organization. And then I'm like, man, you are really, let's say, confound to this environment and this rigid structure. So I don't know how well you would do if you go outside. But then again, if you're there 10, 15 years, I don't expect those people to go outside in the first place.
Yeah.
So then I'm like, okay, do they really learn in the same way at a big tech company? Because it's different learnings, I feel like. They might be really good at bigger organizations then.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's also, these bigger companies probably also have different techniques of like educate people, I guess. I think it's more about, you can actually, I mean, I don't know, maybe go to conferences more, like taking actual courses, like things that I think people in startups typically don't do.
It's not worth it.
It's not worth it, or there's no room to do that, right? But that's, I think, the way to educate like a bigger organization. I can definitely imagine that somebody who's really strong in a company like ING and has been there for 15 years, if that person would go to a startup, that they would kind of drown, right? Like in some situations, it depends a lot on who it is, obviously, but drown in terms of like, you have to do so many things you never did. And I think that's what you really learn at a startup. Like about new topics is basically either the founders or you are a founder. And like, for example, now with the sort of like big like AI movement, I think everybody got sort of like forced to learn that. While if you maybe had a bigger company, you would probably like take courses and you would maybe do some figuring out yourself. While at startups, some startups are just like, okay, we're taking a big leap into AI, and tomorrow we're going to all work on this, right? And so what you kind of see at a startup there is that everybody's like, okay, what's going on? Can I watch YouTube videos about this, right? Can I just like spin up my own models? Can I just try just figuring things out? I think that's a bit more in the sort of like DNA of startups, right? So in terms of learning at a startup, I think it's a lot about, okay, this is your big task. This is the direction we're going in. Just go and figure it out. And I think at bigger companies, that's generally a bit more, I would say, like structured, and I guess maybe also a bit slower, right? So they probably adopt a little bit slower. So yeah, I think that's definitely a big difference. Yeah,
very interesting. I wonder, because I feel like in tech, picking up a new technology and like jumping into the unknown, that's something that you have to do kind of in tech in general, even as a software engineer. Yeah. Not even a new language, but definitely a new technology like we have now with AI. Specifically, it's like, okay, company thinks or sees success in this, but we don't know. There's no blazoned path that we can follow. So it's like, make it your own and figure it out. Yeah. Maybe that's why there's a lot of people from that part kind of going more towards startup vibes, because then you also get a bigger incentive to do that, because it's kind of what you want and what you're there for. Yeah. And it's more of a make or break rather than kind of in the confines of an organization. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think if you, about that learning topic, I think there's still, tech is still pretty much on its own, that even at bigger tech companies, it like, you have to innovate, you have to constantly improve, you have to like, there's a lot of competition. I'm not saying that in other industries there's no competition, but I think that things move a lot slower. Yeah. Right. So people don't learn that. I think there's industries who are not impacted by AI at all right now. And I think it will impact like all the industries, but it will take a lot longer. So people that are there, there's not even real incentive to start learning about this, right? Until it maybe gets to these industries. So I think tech is still, that's kind of the nature of tech, right? Yeah. Talking about risk, then circling back, when it comes to me as a person in a job at a corporate company, or it could be smaller or bigger company, I've always dreamt about like starting a startup.
Yeah.
But initially I thought, people just quit their job and then do that full time. Would you advise that, or do you like the more gradual approach, or how was it with your own path?
You mean like that just like sort of part-time start a company?
I see some people go back to, let's say, 32 hours. They have one day where they do either freelance work or they start building something their own. They want to really create this idea that they have. Or people that say, I just cut off and I do that now full time and then see in a few months if I make it or not.
Yeah. I think my opinion, this is purely from my experience.
Yeah.
Like for me, that would have never worked. I never did it, like doing part-time and then doing part-time a startup.
Yeah.
Maybe at some where like in between startups, I was doing some freelance work, I think. Yeah, and then I was already starting something new, but it was always with the goal of going in full-time. I think obviously there are people who can manage this, right? That have like a sort of side gig, they make good money already and then sort of like transition into it.
Yeah.
But I don't know, like in reality, I think what works much better is just picking a date, right? And be like, okay, I'm going all in. And I think it's also because if you do that, like, I think it's a lot about focus, right? Like if you're still at a company where you like, say, work 32 hours or 24 hours or like 2 days working on your startup, then it's probably a lot of context switching. You still want to deliver on that on your regular job, but then in your head, you're probably in the evenings or in the other days, you're working on a startup. And I think for me at least, it works a lot better to just be like, okay, let's focus completely on this.
Yeah,
this is the only thing I do. Like, and this is maybe personal, right? But I think I also don't like side projects because of this. But that's very personal. I know that there are people doing startups that are doing great side projects, right? And they actually use that to learn and like, I don't know, to network with other people and whatever you do with side projects and maybe make some money on the side, right? Like these kind of things. But personally, I really be like, okay, this is what I build. This is what I do full time. And I basically don't do anything else.
Yeah.
It's also because I feel that with a startup that is the commitment it requires, right? To be like, okay, depends a lot on what you do and in what space you are. But for example, with Rise, taking that as a very recent example, I think that we didn't really know that before going into the space, but the productivity space is extremely competitive, right? There's people constantly trying out stuff. Like it's really hard to sign teams to get on board. Right? There's big players there with large marketing budgets. So I think that needs full focus of like, okay, what am I doing differently? And it just needs all of your time. But that's my take on it. But there's definitely people who can do this successfully. Yeah.
I mean, there's been research, especially within software engineering, that say that, okay, if you context switch a lot, there is time wasted there, right? The more things you have in parallel, the slower everything gets. Yeah. That's also what we do now. I switched to products in the start of this year, and very adamantly, I say we work on one thing at a time. That's it. We don't do things in parallel. Yeah. And then I get stakeholders to say, but the roadmap and we can do things in parallel. I'm like, we can, but everything will go slower. Yeah. So very adamantly, I'm like, one thing at a time. This is full focus. Yeah. And then all of a sudden they get it faster and they're happier. But it took a lot of convincing in that way. Yeah. So I do like that approach, especially with the time and energy that a startup needs as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe it's also a good example. Like we talked about Gerge. When he was a manager at Uber, we worked on this product team, and we were also working working as a team of, so like a cross-functional team of, I think, 8 people, like 8 to 10 people. And we were always working on different projects. And I think Gerge was always really strong and really opinionated about, okay, let's only do like X projects, like 3-4 projects with that team. And if it gets more, then you also see that everything goes slower because people have to context switch to running. Like I was at some point like running 10 projects at the same time, right? And I had to context switch, and it's kind of, my nature is kind of what I like as well, more from the startup side. But I think for a lot of people that's harder, and it gets a lot slower. You have to navigate through different code bases. For designers, you have to completely think about a different business unit you're designing for. So everything, right? So So I think Jurgen was always really strong on, okay, also saying to other stakeholders, okay, our team is full now. We're doing these 3 things until this date, right? This is the deadline, and then we have room again. And so kind of more, make that more sequential than doing too much in parallel. I think that always worked really well in terms of productivity of a team. Yeah.
Yeah, especially if you're in an environment where, let's say that is the norm, that you have things going on in parallel, then I can see if you then start doing side projects, like there's no headspace for that. At least that would be me.
Yeah.
I'm assuming.
Yeah.
But then there is more risk in saying, okay, from this point on, I'm only going to focus on this startup thing, right?
Yeah.
Because things can succeed and things can fail as well.
Yeah.
Can you touch on how success and failure has kind of happened in your past with startups?
So I just for context, I had 2 startups, one out of university. So I also didn't finish university because of that. Longer story, but that was a budgeting tool for consumers, basically what the banks have now. But and we built that, and it eventually got acquired. So I would say it was successful. I think it could have been more. It could have been more successful, but a lot of things going on. But at least it got acquired, and we stayed at that company for a year. So I think that was really nice. Talking also about like having a sort of like buffer you build for later. I think that was good.
Yeah.
Then I did a startup. Which was more in used to have on iPhone. You have to used to have Passbook, I think it's called. Apple Wallet now.
And this was back to back from the other one?
Yeah, I was almost back to back.
Okay.
Yeah, I was almost back to back. So I stayed at that bigger company, and then I left because I couldn't really. I mean, this is just classical founder thing.
Yeah,
right?
you want
we
more.
were there.
Yeah.
Well, and they had opinions about the product because they bought it, and we didn't agree. I kind of loved the company, but you see your own baby kind of like.
That's hard.
Die, and your own focus is also gone. Let's be honest. Like worked on it for a few years, then I don't know. It took some more time for ourselves, I think, and I don't know. It didn't work out. But anyway, after that, it was pretty much back to back. I think there was a small project, small freelance project in between.
Yeah.
And then after that, I did another startup, which was in the Passbook space, which I think I actually loved the product. But I think this was a good example of like with the first company, we had like immediate traction. Like now, when you're looking about when you read about something like product market fit, like that company had it from day one. I think we had a good idea. We had the audience, like Twitter was back then, like coming up in 2007, 2008.
Oh yeah.
So people were excited about it. Like we never did any advertising. We kept on growing. It's just like, I don't know, it was all very natural. I think you have to be also a bit lucky there. We saw that opportunity. There was nothing there in the Netherlands. We could connect to banks. There were a few different reasons, I think, why we had it positioned really well. If I look back, right, coming out of university, it's like, oh, product market fit. It's just like, we just grow, we just build, right? And with that second company, I think that was a really good example of like betting on it, like a technology from Apple, and like Apple Wallet now I think is taking off a little bit because of flight tickets and Apple Pay.
Yeah.
But it back then it just didn't take off. So we had this tool where you could serve up these coupons in your Passbook, in your Passbook app, and people just didn't get it. It was just too early. It was hard. It was also a hard sell. The technology was pretty thin in what we did.
Okay.
So we actually, we raised money for that, and we tried to pivot, and eventually ran out of money. And it's tough. That was tough. I remember the last few months were also tough. Like also among founders, I think you like one founder was actually really trying to do a pivot. Like my commitment was a bit less because I didn't really believe in that pivot, and I also saw kind of the end of the runway coming closer. So then eventually that didn't work out, and then I moved on to Uber. So so that is in terms of like, I think I had there a pretty good example of, I would say, success in the first one, definitely, and I would say failure in the second one. So that is I've seen both, basically.
Talk to me about kind of the emotional investment there, because in the first one you said, okay, it got acquired, and then you see people making decisions about this thing you built up. You even said, my baby, like this product that you have. Yeah. And then for the second one, I mean, you had full focus from the start, right? You believe in something, otherwise you wouldn't start it or build it. And then it didn't work out. Like how have you learned to kind of give that a place from an emotional side?
I don't know. I think I just accepted it. I guess. Like I think I knew already. Also from the first time. I think I so a long time ago, but I think I kind of realized that the first time was sort of like success because we were at the right team at the right place at the right time.
The magic.
The magic, and I think for the second one, I think we had a really strong team, and I think we also, for example, had a really strong team on the sales side of things, and that's why I was also like, okay, let's go, let's do this. But I also soon already realized, like, okay, this is tough, right? This is different than we did the first one. I think it was also the first one focused on consumers. The second one was more focused on like retailers or like B2B.
Yeah,
I think that's also different. So yeah, I think I will also say that emotionally, it's funny that I look back at it this way, but I think emotionally the first startup was a bit more tough, and that was also because we were basically coming out of university, right? And then you start this company. You also didn't raise that much money, so we were also a bit like lean in that sense. We worked like incredibly hard, so it was also really stressful. If you look back, it was great. We won like website of the year and like these kind of things, but it was also like really hard work.
Yeah, in the moment.
So and emotionally that was I think more tough even than the second one. For the second one, we already had that sale before, and we worked on it, but we were also like, okay. I think emotionally was a lot less draining. Yeah. You could argue that's why it didn't become a success, but I'm not sure if that's true. So yeah,
I really like how reflective you are and how you can look at both periods kind of objectively, right?
Yeah,
and also, I mean, judge how the factors of success kind of weighed in there, especially at the start coming out of university. That is kind of a really cool time period. I think looking back at my own career. Like, you come out with a lot of ideas and you just go, basically. You have a lot of energy and you can go also. You don't have many responsibilities, so you can take that risk.
Yeah.
And especially if you find success, then the next one is like, let's do it again. Yeah. Is what I feel like.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't work out. You can figure and get attached to something and the idea of it. But I think it's good to be reflective and then objectively figure out what went right and what went wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you consciously then take a break and go into an organization, or...
I didn't really take a break. I think I even did like a small project in between.
Just kept going.
I just kept. I think I kept going. Yeah. How it kind of went is like we were pretty much at the end of that company of Fosbury, the passbook company, and then I actually didn't really think about like what's next.
Okay.
And then Uber. I've been following Uber for years, just from the startup world, and I think it was sort of like, I don't know, pretty important company, I guess, in that decade.
Yeah.
I think it still is, but in terms of growth in that decade, and so this was around 2000. No, later. It was 2000, end of 2014.
Okay.
And then Uber actually opened an engineering office in the Netherlands. And so Jelle, who was running that office, basically initiating the office, he pinged me and I was like, hey, how are you doing? How's it going at Fosbury? We're like an engineering office, is going to grow really fast. And for me, it was sort of, my first reaction was like, I don't know, right? Working out of it's not big tech, but at a bigger company, I would say.
Yeah.
But then he also invited me over at Uber, and that I think that vibe that company had there's not like, it's very controversial company obviously in that time as well. But I think the vibe when you walked into that office, it was just a big startup. I think we were just about like 4,000 people in the company. But just the way that the company still functioned was very much a startup. And so that was for me, I think the main reason I was like, okay, I can work on things like at scale. I can sort of work on a company at a bit of a later stage than what I've been.
Yeah.
But not like a huge big tech company.
It's not super huge there.
No. So, and that's when I started thinking about like, this could be interesting. So I actually went just through the normal application. And I actually had an amazing time. I think the first from 2015, started early 2015 until about 2018, 18, I think, were actually really, really cool. And in terms of, we were growing so fast. Like, I sometimes give this example of, I was onboarding somebody, and that person had to onboard somebody else 2 weeks later. So it was really like, who's going to onboard this person? And I was like, well, I can do it. Like, I would like, do you feel you can do it? And talking about giving responsibilities, we had people that joined as junior engineers, and they were actually onboarding people after 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Or were doing interviews. Yeah. Right. And they had a bunch of like cultural values to sort of like keep that growth, like keep everyone running in the same direction, which is kind of interesting. Like, how do you grow that fast? But yeah, so I think that's kind of, and then after that also, like I left in 2021. But I think at some point it became bigger. We went public in 2019, which changed a lot also on the payment side. Like earlier on, we were much more sort of like free in what we could do, and then afterwards, obviously things change. It's just the nature of a company that like grows up and gets bigger. And that was also the reason I started looking around. It's like, okay, I kind of like feel this is getting too big for me. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Is it bureaucracy? I think it was relative. There was bureaucracy, but probably not as in other big companies. It was still a very fast moving company, I think, like a lot of big tech companies. So yeah.
I'm curious to hear your perspective on how good is an idea in essence, because Uber started, and I think Uber was one of the first, at least the ones that caught my eye. But then we have Lyft, and now we have Bolt, and in Asia you have different ride-sharing apps. Like there are a few that kind of do the same, and they'll have their own market share. I don't even know sometimes what differentiates them from each other. So it's the same idea, and it's executed in different ways.
Yeah,
I know some friends that really hone in on a specific idea, and they're like, okay, if I don't have a brilliant idea, then I'm not going to start anything, basically.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting topic. I think execution is extremely important. So if you're talking about Uber, there were a few ride-sharing apps. I think it got sort of like, it kind of started out with GPS on the iPhone. I think that's where the main difference, like suddenly the iPhone, you couldn't even realize, I don't think GPS was actually in the first iPhone, which is kind of funny. But like, maybe it's not true I'm saying that, but it was very early. And that was also what I heard, that like the Uber founders were like exploring, because of this, they were exploring ideas, right? They thought like, oh, you could actually just push a button and we could send out like where you are. And so I think that has sort of initiated sort of a wave of these ride-hailing companies.
Because of the technology?
I think so, yeah. That's sort of like big technology. Think maybe something related to what we're now probably seeing with AI. There's like, it opens up this whole probably can of new ideas that you can do that you couldn't do before. And I think that was, there's a bunch of examples of that in the past, obviously. But I think in terms of Uber, what I saw at least, and I think all of these companies were very strong on execution, right? And with Uber, maybe even more than because Uber is in a way a very a physical company, to say, right? Like with physical locations, like with actual cars on the road, much more than just a software product that everybody can use on the internet. It was much more than that. So you had to go out to the cities, you had to sort of acquire the drivers, you had to make sure that, right? So there was a lot of local work involved. So there was definitely, I think Uber had a great tech team. But in the early days, we also sometimes joked internally, like, we're not actually a tech company, because where the real growth came from was from the operations side, people on the ground, like all the managers and all the people that basically landed in new cities and were spinning up new like a whole new network there of Uber drivers. So I think in that sense, there were multiple ideas. I think Uber was very strong on that, on the operational side of things.
Interesting.
And still are, I think so, yeah.
Yes, because you can enable, like with a technology, but you have to land and expand in regions. Yeah.
And that's obviously different with different type of companies. But I think that's what the founders saw pretty early on, that should be really the focus, the operational side of things. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Let's say I have an idea and I look at the market and I see people already doing that. Would that then withhold me from doing that, or is that like a proven thing because my idea, people are doing it, versus the opposite? If I have an idea and no one's doing it, is that a good or a bad thing?
I mean, I think I've been going from what you say about like, oh, nobody's doing it, it's an awesome idea, and let's not tell anybody and just do it, and then we're the first one,
like stealth mode.
To a lot more to like, okay, if you're in a space where companies are successful and they're making money, then that's sort of like an immediate validation if you go into that space. Obviously, that those companies could be much more ahead, so it can be really hard to catch up. Or, but I think there is a sort of a balance there where you probably want to see like, okay, there's a bunch of companies in this space already doing it, but I can have a certain angle that is different than these companies have. But I would say the customers are maybe the same, right? So you know there is actually an audience for your product. I think it's actually a huge red flag if you come up with an idea and you see nobody doing anything like that in the space.
Interesting,
right? There's just a lot of smart people out there, and it's interesting to think that you're smarter than everybody out there, right? People are obviously seeing opportunities and diving into gaps, and definitely, there's definitely, for me, I would lean towards look if there's successful companies, what are they doing? And it's definitely huge validation if you go into a market where there's already successful companies.
Interesting. Then if there are competitors, and especially you're now in the productivity space, if things are very competitive, I feel like your sales and your storytelling becomes a lot more important, maybe more important than the technology or the software that you have, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's also, it's an interesting topic also in terms of like the productivity space and Rise. I think at Rise, we are very strong on the product side. I think we are as a team. And so we really try to use this like product-led growth, right? Led growth. So basically saying like, if we build the very best product out there, people will tell each other. At the same time, in the productivity space, I think that's also really tough, right? There's also a lot of other products that are really strong. Like you said, there's some companies with marketing budgets that are a bit bigger, right? So in terms of that, we've also come to realize, being Rise, that we need to shift more towards the sales side of things.
Okay.
And this is now where we're actually expanding a bit. I think it's kind of like you could have argued like we waited way too long with this. On the other side, I think we also looked for a direction that worked. We were kind of like going back to the Uber founder once said in All Hands, like he said, I never forget, like, you can't scale failure.
Okay.
And I really love that quote in terms of, I wouldn't say that it was failure early in Rise, but it was definitely something that didn't give enough value to the customers so that they would pay. So we were always a little bit holding back in, okay, if nobody's raving about this, then we're not gonna expand and do sales, because then it's gonna be really tough. And then we're maybe also we're gonna sell something that nobody wants, right? So I think that's why we waited with that, and now we're actually expanding much more on that, because we see a lot more traction on the direction we choose, like I would say since January this year. So yeah.
Interesting. I had a conversation recently also on this podcast. It must have been a few weeks back, but I had a friend on, Nick, and he does a lot with regards to AI and startups. And there specifically, since he has a lot of experience with that, I was curious from his perspective on how you delegate decision making. I had two friends, and they were friends in university, even in high school, and they started a company and things got like really bad. Basically, they're not friends anymore.
Okay.
And it's because of that, they had a different opinion on how things had to go specifically. To a point where they're no longer friends. And I think it's a huge shame. But I've seen that happen before. Like, how, because you started as a founder in the startup specifically, how much decision power did you have? Or was it like a split thing? Or how do you delegate decisioning?
It's interesting. Like, I think at the first company we were at 4 founders, which is quite a lot. So
that's chunky.
Had and we also had a lot of meetings, like if I look back compared to now. So with Rise, we went from 3 to 2 founders. It's a related story, but for 4 founders, we noticed we even hired a CEO who was then also sort of a founder, at least in terms of decision making. He was having a big impact there. have a big say in things. So we were with five people, and I remember at like just really random example, but we were at some point having discussions about the business cards, right? The font on the business cards.
Oh yeah,
the five of us.
The minute details.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Yeah, it was really crazy, but that's just an example of, and that was also a point where I was like, what are we talking about here, right? So I also tend to say in that case, like for some things, I don't have an opinion about this. Ask me if you want something like technical or maybe on the product side. But I think that should be, if you were a lot of founders, you should probably agree with each other, like, okay, we trust you on sort of like the sales and the marketing side, and we trust you on the product side, and so give trust there, and just I don't know. I think that's the way to do decision making. That definitely, I think things really get tough when you disagree, and especially when you disagree on a strategic direction.
Oh yeah,
right.
The biggest ones.
Yeah, and then it gets tough because that influences how somebody acts in a company very much, right? And in general, I think one of the so what we had at a company in the past is that we were at some point having 3 different opinions, and we for a few months we said like, okay, let's explore all 3 different directions. And I asked this to another founder, like a friend, like, what do you think of the strategy? And he said like, this is absolutely horrible. What are you doing? And I'm like, okay, yeah, but it's also trying to. But in a way, it worked because you give each other room and you explore different directions. It's also easy when you have a company where everybody's like, this is the product market fit, this is the direction, this is the endpoint, and you just go. I think that's just much easier than you're figuring things out. I think that's a really hard stage, a hard phase of a company, right? Where you're figuring things out, and then people start saying, I'm not sure about this direction. I want to do this, and I want to do this. And then if you have strong opinions, I think that's just, it's really tough. And I think you shouldn't do that too long, like the different direction thing or exploring. It's fine to have like an experiment running or try new things. Obviously, that's what you always want to do. But sort of like I think the high level direction should be really clear amongst the founders. So, yeah.
Let's say you have that high level direction. You start with founders, and you get to a point where there's just too many things that need to happen. So you decide to hire people. Yeah. But that's something where you go from, okay, this is something that we own specifically as founders, and you get people on board. How do you hire the first few people? Like, how do you give that trust to something or someone that you don't know specifically?
I think that always went, at least for me, pretty natural. It's also because I'm not the type of like micromanaging person that wants to be involved in every decision. Yeah, I think that helps a lot. For me, it's more like, oh, I have so many things on my plate, and if I have somebody who's also maybe stronger at a certain topic than I am, right? So, like for Rise, for example, I can definitely say we have like stronger coders than I am in the team, and I actually love to be like, okay, I'm a bit more on the side of, say, like a bit more product and influence and guide like the technical decisions. But I also have people in my team that say like, oh, I have experience with this. I'll just show you how to do this, and then in that sense also delegate stuff to people. So for me, that always went pretty natural. But I can also my company's also been only up to about 20 people, right? So my own company. So in that sense, I wouldn't know how that goes when you would scale it up to 50 or 100 people, how that would work. I think it's also a pretty tough stage in a company, where as a founder, you really have to trust the complete part of, I don't know, engineering or a design or whatever to a team, right? To a manager that has a team, for example. How you maybe traditionally do it. So yeah, I'm not sure about that, how that would work out for me. So yeah.
And the people that come on board, do they get part of equity or do they get a regular salary? Because from my standpoint, if I'm starting up something and I have to hire, I don't have the budget to pay people normal salaries, let's say. Yeah,
definitely. And I think we give equity. We did that early on with everybody in the team. And it has multiple reasons. It's also funny, by the way, that in the Netherlands, this is not so normal, while in, like, for example, in the Bay Area, if you would join as an employee coming from big tech, you would join a company. I think nobody in the Bay Area would consider a job without equity, like going to a startup, right? It would say like, well, I made this at, the model from Gerge. I made this at Apple. Now I'm joining you. Okay, then I want like a high risk, a high upside side of things. So we also did that with Rise. We also like give significant equity to people, and there's obviously a structure attached to that. I think that's very normal to do that.
Yeah.
Which is basically like you have a cliff and then you have some vesting. It's by the way also normal for founders as well. Mm-hmm. And so you so that's and we definitely I think it also, in our case, it also attracted the right people, right? It also attracted the people that can definitely make more money at bigger companies, or a tech company, big tech companies. But they really love working on a product, and they also like the upside of equity, right? And being, it's not even maybe pure financial reason, but also being a part of it, and just the founder say, well, here's some equity, and if you stay longer, and we also increase equity, right? And we and I think that that gives. I think then you also attract the right people that also understand what it's like being at a startup. People also have experience in actually where it worked out well for them. Also, people that where it didn't work out well for them. But yeah, definitely, it allows you to hire more people that you wouldn't maybe be able to hire otherwise. So yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. And I think working at a startup is a different type of fulfillment, right? If you're at a big company, sometimes I felt like I'm a cog, and some people are doing the same thing in a different department, and we don't even know about it or each other, basically. Yeah. And then a startup is like, if you're 20 people, you know what people are doing, basically. We're working on the same thing with the same mindset, the same goal, because otherwise we don't get there.
Yeah, definitely. I think, and that's also true until probably a certain size. Like at the size of my companies that I had, like it was always like I knew pretty much where everybody was working on, like even on a feature level, right? What we were doing. But I can imagine if you also, again, if you scale up, that you don't know that anymore, and that also people who are in those teams don't know exactly like, that's the platform team. That's a sort of split that some companies make at some point, right? Like, this is the platform and those are the product. That's all platform. I don't know, right? So and it's kind of natural, I guess. Like at a way bigger company, you also don't know where people are working on. But yeah, it gives, I think, for me personally, this size that Rise is now. So we're with 7 people now. It's like 2 founders and 5 people in the team. That I really like. You have still the personal connection with people. You know what everybody's working on. You still, I don't know, you can, it's a really nice size to have. I think if it does get bigger, then I would also probably split teams a bit earlier or at that point. So yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. One of the last things I was thinking on was what you mentioned earlier. When new technology comes out, new possibilities open up. And it doesn't happen often with a specific technology. People always say this is disruptive, but usually it turns out not to be that disruptive. I feel like with AI, it is quite disruptive, or it can disrupt, right? It's the promise, exactly. And everyone's trying to experiment and see what kind of the boundaries are. Are you jumping on it as well? I'm not sure how much you want to share about that specifically.
I can't share too much about it, but yeah, definitely. I think one thing is that at Rise, we haven't done any AI features that we implemented. And one reason is that we did some experimenting, right? Obviously, it would be weird if we didn't do anything there.
Yeah.
But we did some experimenting. We were at an on-site like 1.5 years ago, and 1 week we were like, okay, let's build amazing stuff with AI. And it was actually super disappointing in terms of like the model was hallucinating. Like, OpenAI is timing out again. Like I was like, how come somebody build a product here? It was also kind of a reality check of like, okay, are the products actually really good that are out there now with AI? Because what we can build, it was just not that good. And I think what you saw is that we were experimenting, and then we saw around us companies kind of like adding AI stuff everywhere, like chatbot here.
It's like a marketing thing.
Yeah. But also in the product, like pushing stuff, like Slack is still like crazy pushing these kind of features. And it's funny that a lot of people actually also don't like it. So people coming to Rise is like, if we ask about another product, it's like, oh, I'm coming from XYZ product. It's like, oh, do you use any of the AI features? It's like, no, I tried it, but I hated it.
Yeah.
But I think it is definitely changing. I'm not saying that it won't change anything in this space, because now we're actually we are I would say experimenting a lot more. I would say
a year and a half, things are different. Yeah.
And you notice that things are so much stronger now. The models are so much stronger. If you work with OpenAI, for example, they have this like structured outputs, which makes integrating with something like Rise like so much better, because you can rely much more on what a model returns, right? So that's only on the sort of LLM part. So I think, we'll definitely go into that direction, but we've been holding off because we were like, let's also focus on making the actual product that we have really, really strong. And if we see like use cases, also maybe in other products, right, where we're like, okay, this is fantastic, right? The way that they're using AI here is like, that would everybody use and everybody love in the product, then we would definitely introduce it. I can't say too much about it, but we have a lot of stuff in the pipeline coming there. So it's going to be really exciting.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I really like that you don't jump on new technologies immediately. Like I work at a consultancy, and it's like what I see in organizations are proven technologies, right? Yeah. New technologies come with a risk. And if you can afford to experiment. And then experiments can also not lead to the outcomes that you want it to, and you have to accept that, basically. Yeah. If it's not ready yet, then don't use it specifically. You can't push something that's not going to work because it will not work. Yeah. So I really like that as well. Yeah, that's also, it's funny with AI that you, I think it's definitely a huge revolution, right? In everything. You also see it in like coding. Like I have no clue what we'll be doing in 10 years in terms of coding. Yeah. We probably just will be coding, but it will be a lot different the way we do it, or building products, I would say. And it's a lot different. But I also feel we're like super early, right? I think if you ask around, people say like, okay, which AI features in products, in like everyday life, do you actually use? Like for engineers, definitely like something like Copilot or Cursor, right? Like these kind of things. It's being used a lot. But I also, I don't hear a lot of other, I see a lot of products that are being announced. I think in the agent space, which is, I think, sort of the next step from in AI, or it's already happening, but I think a lot is happening there. And things are super exciting, right? But it's also still at the stage that not a lot of people are actually using it. So still in this sort of like pioneering space, I think. Yeah. But yeah, that definitely, I think in a year or 2 years from now, we will really be like, oh, you probably can name, or you can't even name the products anymore because it's so integrated everywhere, right? That it's that is there. So yeah. I really like that perspective. Yeah. I think agents is going to be huge, but let's see how it goes. I've really enjoyed this conversation, Willem. This was a blast.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your perspective on startups and big tech, specifically Uber. Before we round off, is there anything you still want to share?
No, thank you.
Good stuff.
All right, thank you.
Round it off here. Thank you so much for listening. Let us know in the comments section what you thought of this episode, and we'll see you on the next one.